Kaladin starts his existence as a different character named Merrin from what we call the Way of Kings Prime, a book I wrote in 2002. You can read it if you'd like. It's okay. It's not what the Way of Kings eventually became, but he started life as something of a generic soldier. Young man in the military who gets elevated by claiming a powerful weapon on the battlefield, kind of haphazardly and almost accidentally, saving the life of the king's uncle. And he gets knighted, and it's his story of becoming a knight. This version of Kaladin never quite worked. Why didn't it work? Well, Kaladin is in some ways the lead of the Stormlight Archive. It's an ensemble. Everybody's very important. But Kaladin was meant to be our on-ramp as readers into this world, which is why I picked a more generic backstory for him when I started. But this is not a generic world. The world of the Stormlight Archive is my attempt to show off more of the science fiction side of what fantasy could be and push the world further. And I never released the Way of Kings Prime, at least not during the early part of my career, because I wasn't satisfied with him. And I went back to the beginning and started thinking and started mulling over and working. And the real big highlight of what made Kaladin for me was reading about the lives of surgeons during the era just post-medieval, during the early Renaissance, when they were part scientist and they were part doctor, and they were largely feared and disliked, even though the surgeon was often using best, for the time, medical practices. When a lot of the healers and doctors were bloodletting and things like this, the surgeon actually knew the body, and that was kind of taboo. And I thought, what would it be like to live as a surgeon during one of these eras where you have some real scientific knowledge, but everyone assumes that what you're doing is unnatural? That mixed with the idea that struck me one day of what if you were that surgeon and you ended up at war and you realized that the same sort of skills that made you a pretty good surgeon also made you a very good butcher. And you found out you were really good at being a soldier. You were good at healing, you were good at killing. And that dichotomy of who that person is started to really become the core of Kaladin. People who, when they're describing Kaladin, often bring up the fact that he has depression as a core aspect of his personality. That's obviously an important part of him, but that's not really as much how I view him. I view the push and pull between who do I protect and who do I kill to be really what makes him who he is. Depression is an aspect of who he is. It's part of his personality. It is something he struggles with, but it is not his story, if that makes sense. Overcoming some of his limitations, some of his problems, well, that's the sort of stuff we all do. We're wrestling with our own mental health and with the way we perceive the world. I don't want to downplay how important that is to him, but at the same time, Kaladin wouldn't want to be defined by that, and his story is not defined by that. The story is not depression, the story is Kaladin. And Kaladin's story is that push and pull as he becomes a different person. So I started kind of with the same man that Merrin had been, but with this whole backstory, and then I had to make a very different decision than Merrin did, and it was right. And Kaladin grew out of that different decision, which you can find if you read the Stormlight Archive, and those of you who have probably know already.